My name is Jennifer Riley. I'm 28, and my life's been a roller coaster of family drama that exploded at my dad and stepmom's 25th anniversary party in Fort Collins, Colorado. Picture this: I'm engaged to my fiancé, the love of my life, and we're planning our future. But my parents, they're convinced he's perfect, not for me, but for my unemployed, freeloading younger sister. She's been crossing lines, sending him flirty texts, batting her eyes at family dinners, acting like she can steal him right under my nose. And my stepmom, she eggs her on, dropping hints that he'd be better off with her precious daughter. My dad just sits there, silent, letting it happen. It's infuriating. It all came to a head at their big anniversary bash. My stepmom was parading my sister around, whispering about how she's the better match. I was fuming, ready to walk out, but my fiancé had other plans. Right in the middle of the party, he stood up, looked straight at my stepmom, and asked if the neighbor was perfect for her. The room froze, their faces priceless, jaws dropped, eyes wide like they'd been slapped with the truth. What he said next exposed a secret that turned our family upside down. Want to know what happened? Stick around. This gets wild. Comment the time and the city you're watching this from right now. I really want to see how far this family drama has traveled around the world. When I was 10, my world turned upside down. My mom passed away after a long illness, leaving me and Dad alone in our Fort Collins home. I clung to him, hoping we'd get through it together. But a year later, he brought home Anne, his new wife. I was still grieving, barely 11, when my sister was born. Dad called her Kay, and from that moment, everything changed. Anne took over our house like she'd always been there, rearranging furniture, setting new rules, and making it clear I wasn't her priority. Dad, desperate to keep the peace, let her run the show. I felt like an outsider in my own home, watching Anne dot on her newborn while I was left to fend for myself. Anne wasn't just strict, she was controlling. She'd scrutinize my every move, from how I folded laundry to what I ate for breakfast. But with Kay, she was different. All soft smiles and endless patience. I'd catch her whispering to Dad about how Kay was special while I was just expected to be perfect. By the time I hit middle school, Anne started pitting me against my sister. She'd compare our report cards, my straight A's against Kay's struggling C's, and say things like, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" to Kay, right in front of me. It wasn't fair, but I swallowed my hurt, thinking it would get better if I tried harder. Kay didn't take it well. She was only 6 when the comparison started, too young to handle Anne's pressure. By the time she was 9, she'd glare at me across the dinner table, her eyes burning with resentment. I'd worked hard for my grades, stayed up late studying, joined the debate team, even ran track to make Dad proud. But Anne made it seem like my success was a personal attack on Kay. "You're making your sister feel bad," she'd snap when I brought home another award. I'd tried to talk to Kay, offer to help with her homework, but she'd push me away, muttering, "You're not my mom." It stung, but I kept trying, hoping we'd find some kind of bond. Dad could have stopped it. He saw how Anne favored Kay, how she brushed me off like I didn't matter. I'd look at him, waiting for him to say something, anything, to defend me. But he'd just sit there, staring at his plate, avoiding my eyes. Once, I asked him why he let Anne treat me like that. He sighed, rubbed his temples, and said, "Jennifer, I just want a peaceful house." That was it. No apologies, no standing up for me. He chose Anne's happiness over mine, and it broke something inside me. I started keeping my distance, staying late at school, burying myself in books to escape the tension at home. Annie's obsession with competition only got worse. In high school, she signed Kay up for every activity I was in: debate, track, even the school play, though Kay had no interest. "You need to keep up with your sister," Anne would lecture, her voice sharp. Kay tried, but she couldn't match my grades or my times on the track. Instead of encouraging her, Anne would turn it on me, saying I was showing off or making Kay feel small. I wasn't trying to outshine anyone. I just wanted to do well. But Kay's resentment grew, and she'd lash out, slamming doors or ignoring me for days. I'd hear her crying in her room sometimes, and I'd feel guilty, like it was my fault for being the better one. By high school, Kay's struggles were impossible to ignore. Annie's pressure to outshine me had taken its toll on her. My sister was barely 15 when she started sneaking out to parties, coming home with the smell of alcohol on her breath. I'd hear her stumbling up the stairs late at night, whispering to herself, trying to hide it from Anne. I wanted to help, but every time I tried talking to her, she'd snap, "Leave me alone. You're not my mom." It hurt, but I understood. She was drowning in Anne's expectations, always compared to my grades, my track medals, my debate wins. Anne would pin Kay's report cards on the fridge next to mine, circling her C's in red pen, muttering, "You need to try harder like your sister." Kay's response wasn't to study more, it was to rebel. It all crashed down when Kay was 17. She went to a friend's party in Fort Collins, one of those chaotic high school bashes with too many kids and not enough supervision. She drank too much, way too much, and ended up passed out in someone's backyard. A friend's mom found her, called an ambulance, and Kay landed in the hospital with alcohol poisoning. I was in my senior year of college, living on campus, when Dad called me, his voice shaking. "Your sister's in the ER," he said. I rushed to the hospital, heart pounding, only to find Anne, sobbing by Kay's bedside, clutching her hand like she'd never let go. Dad stood in the corner, head down, saying nothing. The doctors said Kay would recover, but it was a wake-up call, or at least it should have been. Instead, Anne flipped a switch. Overnight, she went from pushing Kay to compete with me to treating her like a fragile doll. She started showering Kay with gifts, new clothes, a shiny phone, $100 bills for pocket money. Kay didn't have to lift a finger anymore. Anne did her laundry, cooked her favorite meals, even wrote excuses for her missed assignments. I'd come home for breaks and see Kay lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone while Anne fussed over her like a queen. "She's been through enough," Anne would say, glaring at me as if I'd caused it. I couldn't believe it. Kay nearly died, and Anne's solution was to spoil her rotten. It was like rewarding her for falling apart. Dad, as usual, stayed out of it. I'd catch him watching Anne fuss over Kay, his jaw tight, but he never said a word. Once I pulled him aside in the kitchen and asked, "Why don't you do something? This isn't fair to anyone." He just sighed, rubbing his eyes. "I can't fight with Andana. It'll make things worse." I wanted to scream. He was my dad, supposed to protect us both, but he was too scared of Anne's temper to stand up for me, or even for Kay. His silence felt like betrayal, leaving me to deal with the fallout of Anne's favoritism alone. The unfairness ate at me. Annie's focus was all on Kay now, like I didn't exist. I'd walk into the house and she'd barely acknowledge me, too busy buying Kay another pair of sneakers or praising her for doing nothing. Kay, for her part, leaned into it. She'd smirk at me when Anne wasn't looking, like she'd won some twisted game. I felt invisible, pushed out of my own family. The more Anne coddled Kay, the more I pulled away. I stopped coming home as often, skipping family dinners, avoiding Anne's cold stares. Kay's hospital stay should have brought us closer, but it only widened the gap between us. I threw myself into building my own life. After graduating college, I landed a marketing job in Fort Collins, rented a small apartment, and started dating my boyfriend. He was kind, steady, everything my family wasn't. We'd spend evenings talking about our dreams, planning a future far from the chaos of my childhood home. I still loved Dad, but I couldn't rely on him anymore. Anne's favoritism and Kay's dependence were suffocating, and I was done trying to fit into their world. I told myself I'd focus on my career, my relationship, and leave the past behind. But deep down, I knew the tension with Anne and Kay wasn't over. It was just waiting to explode. After her hospital stay, Kay became the center of Anne's world. My sister had no job and no ambition, living off Dad and Anne's money like it was her birthright. Anne paid for her new apartment in Fort Collins, stocked with designer furniture, while Kay ordered takeout daily and splurged on luxury handbags. I'd worked hard to afford my modest place, budgeting every paycheck from my marketing job, but Anne brushed it off, saying, "Kay needs support to find her path." It was maddening to see my sister coast through life while I scraped by, expected to fend for myself. Then Kay turned her attention to my boyfriend Lawrence. We'd been together 2 years, building a life grounded in trust and shared dreams. But Kay started pushing boundaries. At family gatherings, she'd hover near him, laughing too hard at his jokes, brushing her fingers against his sleeve. One evening, I caught a text she sent him. "Hey, want to grab coffee sometime? Just us." My heart sank. When I confronted her, she shrugged, smirking. It's not a big deal, Jennifer. Chill. But her eyes lingered on Lawrence too long, her intentions clear. I felt a mix of anger and betrayal, wondering how my sister could stoop so low. The breaking point came at our family's Christmas party. Anne had transformed our Fort Collins home into a festive showcase, with a glittering tree and relatives packed around the dining table. I brought Lawrence, hoping for a peaceful night, but Anne had other plans. During dessert, she raised her glass and said, "Kay's become such a lovely young woman. She'd be a great match for someone like Lawrence." My fork froze midair. Kay grinned, leaning closer to Lawrence, who stiffened beside me. The room buzzed with awkward glances, but Dad just sat there, staring at his plate, avoiding my gaze. His silence felt like a knife, cutting deeper than Anne's blatant favoritism. I was livid, but held it together until we left. At a quiet coffee shop the next day, I spilled everything to Lawrence. "Anne's pushing Kay at you, and Dad just lets it happen," I said, gripping my latte. Lawrence nodded, his face tight. "It's messed up, Jennifer. Kay's playing along, and Anne's enabling her." He promised he'd never entertain Kay's advances, his loyalty unwavering. "We need to set boundaries," he said. "No more family events unless it's absolutely necessary." I agreed, relieved, but still hurt. We decided to keep our distance, limiting contact to avoid Anne's manipulation and Kay's games. Anne didn't take the hint. Months later, she started calling about their 25th anniversary party, her voicemails dripping with urgency. "Jennifer, you and Lawrence have to be there," she said. "It's a milestone for your dad and me." I ignored her, but she persisted, leaving messages about family unity. One night, she said, "Kay's counting on seeing you both." The idea of Kay, who flirted with my boyfriend, expecting us there, made my skin crawl. I told Anne we'd consider it, but her pressure felt like a trap. Lawrence and I talked it over, sipping coffee in the dim shop. "This feels like another setup," I said, my voice low. Lawrence leaned forward, his eyes serious. "If we go, we stay on guard. No more letting them walk over us." I nodded, knowing we'd face the party for Dad's sake, but ready to protect our peace. One morning, Anne sent me a text asking for $2,000 to cover party expenses for their 25th anniversary. I knew it was a lie. Kay's endless shopping and dining out were draining their funds. I'd worked hard to build my life, saving every penny from my marketing job, while Kay contributed nothing. "No way," I replied. "Kay needs to get a job if you're struggling." Anne fired back, "You're turning your back on family, Jennifer." I deleted her message, my hands trembling with frustration. Family didn't mean bankrolling my sister's laziness. Anne kept up the pressure, but not about money. She sent a group family text urging everyone to attend the anniversary party for a night of unity. The words felt hollow after her Christmas stunt praising Kay at my expense. Her message ended with, "It's what Irving deserves." That stung. Dad's silence hurt, but he was still my dad, and the thought of losing him entirely ate at me. I ignored the text, but a handwritten note arrived days later, Annie's cursive pleading for Lawrence and me to show up. "It'll bring us closer," she wrote. I scoffed, tossing it aside, but the guilt lingered. Lawrence and I debated during a walk in a Fort Collins park, the spring air cool against our faces. "Anne's trying to guilt trip you," he said, kicking a pebble. "Kay might pull something again, too." I nodded, my stomach tight. "I know, but if we skip it, Dad might drift away for good." Lawrence stopped, his eyes softening. "If it's for your dad, we'll go, but we're not letting them push us around." Reluctantly, we agreed to attend the party at a swanky restaurant, but I braced myself for drama. Anne and Kay had crossed too many lines to expect a peaceful night. I spent days mentally rehearsing how to handle them. I imagined Kay flirting with Lawrence again, or Anne making another snide comment. I told myself I'd stay composed, but Lawrence was less patient. "If they try anything, I'm done holding back," he said, his voice firm. I spent sleepless nights dreading the inevitable clash, knowing we'd need to be ready for anything. The party loomed like a storm cloud, and I felt both fear and determination. Then a bombshell dropped. Lawrence was sorting through an old phone I'd lent Anne years ago when he found texts between her and a married neighbor. They were from before Kay's hospital stay, but suggestive. Secret meetings, winking emojis, and saying she needed an escape. Lawrence showed me, his jaw tight. This is serious, Jennifer. Annie is not who she pretends to be. My heart raced. It was a gut punch, but also a weapon. I felt a spark of resolve, knowing we had leverage. That night, we walked through the park again, planning our approach. We don't start trouble, Lawrence said, his voice low. But if Anne or Kay push too far, we use this. They need to know they can't control us. I agreed, my anger outweighing my nerves. If they cross the line, we expose her, I said. We decided to hold the texts back unless absolutely necessary, but the knowledge gave us strength. The party was days away, and I was ready to face Anne and Kay, no longer the overlooked daughter, but someone who'd fight for her place. A week later, Lawrence and I stepped into the elegant Fort Collins restaurant, its chandeliers casting a warm glow over linen-covered tables. Relatives filled the room, their chatter mixing with soft music, celebrating Dad and Anne's 25th anniversary. My pulse raced as we took our seats, my eyes scanning for trouble. Anne sat at the head table, radiant in a silver dress, while Dad looked weary beside her. Kay, in a flashy sequined outfit, caught my gaze and smiled slightly. I squeezed Lawrence's hand, bracing for the storm we'd planned for. Trouble came quickly. Anne had orchestrated the seating, placing Kay right beside Lawrence. My sister wasted no time leaning close to whisper something, her laughter sharp and deliberate. She dropped her napkin, nudging Lawrence to pick it up, her fingers grazing his as he handed it back. My chest tightened, but I stayed silent, watching. Then Anne stood, clinking her glass. I want to toast Kay, she said, her voice sugary. She's blossomed into such a vibrant woman, someone any man would be lucky to have. Her gaze lingered on Lawrence, and a hush fell over the table. Kay batted her eyes, clearly reeling in the attention. It was a blatant repeat of their Christmas antics, and I'd had enough. I rose, my hands trembling, but my voice firm. Stop it, Anne, I said loud enough for all to hear. Your favoritism has gone on too long. You prop up Kay while ignoring me, and now you're encouraging her to chase my boyfriend. It's unacceptable. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Kay's face flushed, her confidence cracking. I turned to her. And you, Kay, you know better. Your disrespect ends here. Anne opened her mouth, but I cut her off. No more excuses. You've both crossed the line. Dad stared at his hands, his silence a familiar sting, but I was done waiting for him to speak. Lawrence stood, his presence steady beside me. Anne, you're in no position to play matchmaker, he said, his tone cutting. Not when you were sneaking around with the neighbor behind Irving's back. The room froze. Relatives exchanged wide-eyed glances, some leaning forward, others clutching their glasses. Anne's face drained of color. That's a lie, she stammered, but her voice wavered. Lawrence pressed on. We saw the texts. Anne, late-night plans, flirty messages. You betrayed Irving, and you're not fooling anyone. Dad's head jerked up, his eyes locked on Anne, a mix of shock and pain crossing his face. The air felt heavy, charged with the weight of truth. My cousin Brent, who'd been quietly observing, set down his drink. He'd always stayed out of our family's mess, but now he spoke. Jennifer's telling the truth, he said, his voice calm but resolute. Anne, you've sidelined Jennifer for years, favoring Kay at every turn, and now this, pushing Kay at Lawrence, is wrong. And those texts? You owe us all answers. His words landed like a blow. Anne looked around, searching for allies, but found none. Kay's eyes welled up, her bravado gone. The relatives whispered, some shaking their heads, others staring at Anne in disbelief. Dad remained silent, his head bowed low, as if the weight of the revelation crushed him. Anne tried to recover, muttering about misinterpretations, but her voice lacked conviction. She grabbed her purse, her movements jerky, and signaled to Kay. We're done here, she said, her tone brittle. Kay followed her, head down, avoiding the judgmental stares. They hurried out, the restaurant's glass doors swinging shut behind them. The room buzzed with hushed conversations, relatives dissecting the drama. Dad didn't move, his shoulders slumped, his silence louder than any outburst. Lawrence took my hand, his grip warm and reassuring. For the first time, I felt unburdened, as if the truth had carved out space for me to breathe. After the party, Kay's behavior got worse. My sister didn't take the public humiliation lightly. She started bombarding Lawrence with texts, some flirty, others outright hostile. "You'll regret choosing her," one message read, sent at 2 a.m. I found it when Lawrence showed me his phone, his face grim. Then Kay escalated, showing up uninvited at my apartment in Fort Collins. One evening, we found her leaning against our door, her eyes glassy, demanding to speak to Lawrence. "You owe me a conversation," she said, her voice slurring. I pushed past her, heart pounding, and told her to leave. She laughed, unfazed, but left after Lawrence threatened to call the police. That was the last straw. We couldn't let it continue. Lawrence and I filed for a restraining order the next week, documenting Kay's texts and her unannounced visit. The process was grueling, but the court granted the order, barring Kay from contacting us or coming near our home. For a moment, I thought it might end there, but Kay ignored the order. 2 weeks later, she showed up at my workplace, a small marketing firm, lingering in the parking lot. A coworker spotted her, and I called the police. They arrested her on the spot, her defiance crumbling as they cuffed her. At the hearing, the judge was stern, ordering Kay to attend mandatory therapy for her obsessive behavior. Anne, sitting in the courtroom, was slapped with hefty legal fees to cover the case. Her face tightened, but she said nothing, her usual bravado gone. The fallout hit Anne hard. She'd always presented herself as the perfect mother, but the community in Fort Collins started pulling away. Neighbors whispered about her affair, and old friends stopped inviting her to gatherings. Kay's arrest only fueled the gossip. At a local charity event, I overheard someone say, "Anne enabled that girl for years, and now look." Anne's social circle shrank, her reputation tarnished. Kay, once the darling of their circle, faced the same rejection. Her former friends distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with her reckless actions. I felt a strange mix of vindication and pity, watching their carefully built image collapse. Meanwhile, Dad reached a breaking point. One quiet afternoon, he called me to a diner near our old family home. His hand shook as he spoke. "I'm filing for divorce, Jennifer," he said, his voice heavy. "Anna's lies, her affair. I can't stay with her." He admitted he'd been weak, letting Anne favor Kay while neglecting me. "I should have stood up for you." His eyes wet, he whispered, "I failed as your father, and I'm ashamed." His words hit me hard. I'd waited years to hear him acknowledge it, but the pain lingered. "I just want you to try, Dad," I replied, my throat tight. "Be there for me now." He nodded, promising to rebuild what we'd lost, but I knew it would take time. Kay's court-ordered therapy didn't go smoothly. She resisted, skipping sessions, until the judge threatened jail time. Anne, drained by legal costs, couldn't keep up her usual defense of Kay. The dynamic that had defined their family and enabled Kay's dependence was unraveling. I heard from my cousin Brent that Anne had started selling her jewelry to cover expenses, a stark contrast to her former extravagance. Brent, who'd backed me at the party, called to check in. "They're paying for their choices," he said, his tone firm. "You did what you had to, Jennifer." His support grounded me, a reminder that I wasn't alone. Life began to shift. Lawrence and I focused on our future, planning our wedding with a renewed sense of peace. The restraining order held, and Kay's antics stopped, at least for now. Anne and Kay's absence from Fort Collins' social scene became permanent, their names fading from invitations and conversations. Dad started calling more, checking in with small gestures, a text about my day, an offer to meet for coffee. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I felt lighter, no longer carrying the weight of their drama. The truth had exposed them, and for the first time, I was free to build my life without their shadows. A year after the chaos, my life felt free. The weight of Anne and Kay's drama no longer pressed on me, and I could finally breathe. Dad and I had found a fragile peace, but it came with boundaries. I forgave him for his years of silence, for letting Anne sideline me while favoring Kay. We met occasionally, usually for coffee at a small Fort Collins diner. "I'm trying, Jennifer," he'd say, his voice soft but earnest. I nodded, appreciating his effort, but kept our talk short, focusing on simple things like my job or his new hobbies. The trust we'd lost wasn't fully rebuilt, and I needed space to protect my heart. Still, his calls and texts were a small step forward, a sign he was finally showing up. Anne and Kay, meanwhile, vanished from Fort Collins. After the court case and their social downfall, they packed up and moved to a small town hours away. Word spread fast in our tight-knit community. Neighbors gossiped about Anne's affair, and Kay's arrest sealed their isolation. Friends who once fawned over Anne's parties stopped calling, and Kay's old crowd shunned her, unwilling to be tied to her reckless reputation. I heard from my cousin Brent that Anne was struggling to start over, her charm useless in a new place. Kay, still in therapy, cut contact with everyone, including me. Their absence was a relief, like a storm finally passing, leaving quiet in its wake. Lawrence and I turned our focus to our future. We were planning our wedding, set for next spring in a cozy Fort Collins venue. We spent evenings picking out flowers and tasting cakes, laughing over small details like table settings. "You're stuck with me now," Lawrence teased, his eyes warm as we walked through a park, dreaming of our life together. My marketing job was thriving, and Lawrence's new promotion gave us stability to build our home. We weren't perfect, but we were solid, grounded in mutual respect and love. The chaos of my family felt like a distant memory, replaced by a sense of purpose and joy. Looking back, I learned hard truths. Family isn't an excuse for disrespect, and setting boundaries, even with those you love, is essential. Anne and Kay's actions, pushing Kay at Lawrence, ignoring my worth, came with consequences they couldn't escape. Their social exile and broken ties were proof that hurtful behavior catches up eventually. I realized my strength came from standing up for myself, from choosing my peace over their drama. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. I'd spent years seeking approval from a family that didn't value me, but now I knew my worth didn't depend on them. To everyone who's followed this story, thank you. Your support, your comments, and your own stories of family struggles mean the world. It's comforting to know I'm not alone, that others have faced similar battles and come out stronger. Sharing this has been healing, a way to let go of the pain and embrace the life I'm building. I hope my story resonates with you, maybe even inspires you to set your own boundaries or stand up when you're not being respected. Your empathy keeps me going, and I'm grateful for every one of you who's taken this journey with me. If this story touched you, please subscribe to the channel for more. Share it with someone who might relate, and drop a comment below about your own family experiences. How have you dealt with toxic dynamics or set boundaries? Your stories inspire me just as much as mine might inspire you. Let's keep this conversation going, supporting each other through the ups and downs. Thank you again for being here, for listening, and for reminding me that we're all in this messy, beautiful thing called life.